The Biden administration must reserve its policy and redesignate the Houthis as a terrorist organization. President Joe Biden has to listen carefully to what the major think tanks in Washington are saying, following careful studies about the crimes of the Yemeni group. It is the duty of such researchers to locate the intellectual sources that indicate the impossibility of the Houthis not being classified as a terrorist outfit.
In all of the discussions that we've had about the catastrophic, disastrous, reprehensible civil war in Yemen, the one country that we should be talking the most about, and yet we seem to talk the least about, is the Islamic regime in Iran, which has fueled and funded and provided the weapons of war to the Houthi rebel movement that in turn has historically hit Saudi Arabia countless times at great cost to civilian lives in clear terrorist activities, and now has twice attacked our ally in the United Arab Emirates. The Houthis are, have been around since the 90s. They're not the sort of rebel movement that is manufacturing weapons. Weapons that they're utilizing are being imported, and this is the single greatest, essentially gasoline on the fire of this civil war that is both a humanitarian crisis, one of the greatest in the world right now, and also represents a serious strategic threat to U.S., Western, and our Gulf allies in a moment when we're facing quite a number of such threats globally.
Many research institutes in Washington have passed important judgment about the Houthi menace. Collectively, they constitute a strategic opportunity for the U.S. government to change the thinking that drove the Biden administration to last year remove the group's name from the list of designated foreign terrorist organizations, apparently because there is a need for the Houthis to distribute humanitarian assistance. How can humanitarian aid continue while the Houthis are stealing it?
First of all, I believe that the stability and peace in the region is one of the important issues for the states around the Persian Gulf. And unfortunately, most of the groups that they are related to IRGC and the terrorist organization of Quds Force in Iran and Mullah's regime, they don't like stability and peace in the region because they like to make a chaos, they like to make instability. And regrettably, this government in the Washington, D.C., they wanted to have a deal with the terrorist-loving mullahs, which is a fruitless, attempt, because in diplomacy, the terrorist-loving mullahs, they don't know the meaning of that. And so the existence and we can say that the survival of the mullahs are depending on terrorism, and terrorism is one of the main elements of the mullah in the region, which is the outlaw regime in Tehran. And most of the Arab states in the region, they know that pretty well. So for the reason peace and stability in Yemen depends on the strong will and main decision of the United States to help Saudi Arabia and Emirat to make this happen. But personally, I believe this administration has a very strong intelligence organization, but they have a very weak, unclear policy regarding the Middle East.
Ultimately, Biden and his team have to get rid of their yearning to sign a nuclear deal with Iran, as this is a sign of America's weakness. Any new Iran deal would also beset the cooperation the U.S. has spent decades cultivating with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and it would encourage the Houthis to launch more missile attacks against these two important Arab countries.
Well, there was simply no reason to remove them in the first place. Former President Trump was absolutely straight on target in putting the Houthis on that designation. I can give you their explanation from the Biden administration. They said that there were aid relief workers that had represented that they were concerned about litigation and being accused of violations of it. Quite honestly, none of that really adds up. And it wasn't the only negative step that they've taken in this policy. They also, ended the military support for the Saudi-led coalition, which really was, essentially the singular force containing and constraining Iranian and Houthi aggression in that region, including attacks against Saudi civilian and Saudi petroleum sites. And so those are costly from a human life and civilian standpoint. And the attack on the Saudi oil facility, this is an extraordinarily large facility that is one of the largest in the world. In fact, is designed really to drive up the price of petroleum, which is beneficial to what country? Not beneficial to the Houthis, not beneficial to Yemen, certainly not beneficial to Saudi Arabia. It's been benefiting Iran, which derives over 80% of their revenue from petroleum exports to only a few countries, and has a collapsing domestic currency and a collapsing domestic economy. We're, under the Biden administration, sadly moving in the wrong direction in just about every respect in U.S. national security policy and in U.S. foreign relations.
Biden should not delegate condemning Iran and the Houthis, who are now also attacking the UAE, to his subordinates. He himself has to single them out as culpable for their crimes. Meanwhile, the Emirati government should start launching airstrikes from its Al Zafra air base to destroy the missile launchers operated by the Houthis. The U.S. president should discuss with the Pentagon how to endorse such defensive and necessary strategic moves by the UAE.
I can say the foreign terrorist organization, which is very important for American intelligence community, or we can say American intelligence society. And one of the important issue is the White House has unclear policy regarding the terrorism in the Middle East. Most of them, they believe that Russia is a new actor in the Middle East, so they can make it in the multipolar system, in the international system, which is not very true, because we have some states that they help and they develop and they protect the cells of the terrorists around the globe and around the region. One of the most dangerous terrorist states in the world is the mullahs one, and they are helping this terrorist organization to do the operations around the Middle East. But personally, I believe for the United States, they should redesign this terrorist group as a foreign terrorist organization as soon as possible. And the former decision was completely wrong, because they didn't respect the stability and peace of the Bahrain, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and something like that, because this group are related to the terrorist group of the IRGC in Iran. Personally, I believe that most of the groups, terrorist groups, that they are working with the Iranian regime, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, PKK, and Houthis, jihadis in Afghanistan, or Al Qaeda, or Palestinian jihadis, all of them, they are terrorist groups. And they have bases and dark cells in the West and United States, unfortunately. But right now, I believe that we should condemn strongly that the Houthis terrorist activities in Emirates and Saudi Arabia and most of the parts of the region is just a coward action. And personally, I believe they cannot do anything more. Just they wanted to be pleased by the order of the Khamenei in Iran. So the Houthis terrorist attack is condemned by all the modern world.
In fact, the war in Yemen is going on because of the Houthis' crimes and Iran's endorsement of their policies. If Biden were to read the studies available to him, he would reverse his incorrect conviction that the Houthis and Iran are interested in a peaceful settlement to the conflict. Finally, Biden should outline his Yemen policies by delivering a speech quoting various think tanks' crucial conclusions on its war.
I believe our relationship improved, markedly with Saudi Arabia and with Riyadh under the Trump administration. That relationship is important. It's never been perfect. It's not perfect now, but it's really vital. The single greatest threat, and really increasingly the only major threat in this region, which I think most Americans can oversimplify as just being filled with problems. There's really one problem. It's the Islamic regime in Iran, which has supported literally every terrorist movement you could almost think of in the region, and in devastating and very costly ways, and really has global reach. I mean, we talk predominantly about Hamas and Hezbollah, and the Palestinian terrorist factions, but their reach has been into Latin America, it's been in Europe, it's been into Africa. Meanwhile, this is a country that's not able to take care of its own people, and increasingly, it's an intolerable regime. I mean, you sort of ask the question: at what point does a regime become so utterly repressive of its people and so dangerous to the rest of the world in its acts that it's a time for a change? And I have felt that way for a long time, and not ashamed to say that. I don't believe that's something the United States necessarily needs to lead or even should lead, but I do believe that change is due in Iran. And I think it will be one of the most constructive developments in the world, at least in this 21st century.
There is no more evidence required to show that the Houthis are a threat to regional peace, global stability, and the national security of the U.S. Can Biden take swift action against the terrorist group?